All right. Gaza War Day 270. Fighting everywhere all at once. Let's start with Yemen. There are more joint Yemen-Iraq missile attacks. They used, I think, cruise missiles to attack Haifa, Iraq, and Yemen, and they said they were targeting a vital target in Haifa. You've probably, if you've watched this channel, you know about the target bank that was produced by Hezbollah's Hoopo bird video. So uh, presumably all the resistance knows about all of the targets that were identified by that Hoopo bird in that drone video. We don't know what they hit in Haifa, but they claim to have hit something. The Yemen Ansar Allah, also the spokesman Yahya Sari, he also announced cryptically that they will be announcing something major in 3 days. 3 days from now would make it Friday, the day of their regular million-man march in Yemen, and a good day to announce whatever it is that they're announcing. Probably they say that they're in phase 4 right now, and they're probably announcing phase 5. They've added new weapons to their arsenal. They're showing off hypersonic ballistic missile. They're showing off the Palestine missile. They were showing off the Tufan series of explosive remote controlled boats with 1.5-ton explosive payloads. So they'll be announcing something big. Gaza is what I meant when I said fighting everywhere all at once. There's an interesting situation in the sense that Gaza has I don't remember it being quite like this until now. Mostly what I remember about the war was that the Israelis have focused on one part of Gaza at a time. And what they seem to be doing now is attacking everywhere. They're attacking in Rafah, they're attacking in Gaza City, in the neighborhood of Shujaiya, they're attacking in the middle camps, they're attacking along the corridor, the Netzarim Corridor, so around Deir el-Balah and Nusayrat al-Makraka. They're attacking all along that corridor, all the way down to Khan Yunis. They've ordered the evacuation of Khan Yunis, so that's 100,000, hundreds of thousands of people that have been condemned to move around again pointlessly because they have nowhere to go. And they're attacking they're attacking um in Rafah. Did I say Rafah already? They're attacking all across the Gaza Strip. They're attacking sites in the middle, north, and the south. So just to show you what I mean, here's Rafah. If you're watching this, and you know they occupied this civilian-controlled corridor between Rafah, Gaza, and Rafah, Egypt, the so-called Philadelphia corridor. They ordered everyone to leave Khan Yunis. They're committing aerial massacres all around here. Juradik, Magraka, Nusayrat, Deir al-Balah, all here. And along this is the Netzarim corridor is somewhere here. And they're fighting in Gaza City. I believe Shujaiya is. Let's see if it appears on this. I think it's here. I think it's the entrance. Maybe I'll search for it, but I think it's one of the ways in. Search. No results found for Shujaiya. Anyway, I'll come back to it. But they're fighting in Gaza City and Tel El Hawa as well. So like I think they're fighting in South Gaza City, I guess. Let's put it that way. But they also committed a major aerial massacre in Zaytun neighborhood where they've fought multiple battles. Let me just try to get Shujaiya on a map. Shujaiya, Gaza. Nope, nope. Maps. Oh, maybe I'll get a Google map for you. How about that? Shujaiya, Gaza. Shujaiya, that's how they do it. Okay. Yeah, so to show you, it actually isn't really all that more south in Gaza City. It's just Gaza City. So here's Shujaiya, um, Jabalia, Zaytun, bombing, shelling all here, and fighting, lots of fighting in Shujaiya. So what does that mean that they're fighting all up and down Gaza? It means they're not putting all their forces together for a big punch. They're dispersing their forces throughout Gaza, and they're getting hit all everywhere in Gaza. So you're gonna see videos. You've probably seen sniper videos. You've probably seen a remarkable video of two Qassam fighters placing bombs directly onto a tank and a huge explosion. That I saw that today. You've probably seen, what else did I see? Lots of Yasin 105 videos where they're hitting the tanks with their anti-tank missile system, shoulder-launched missile system. Tons of mortar attacks. Yeah, there's a mortar. There was an attack on the Israelis in the Netzarim corridor where they said they fired 200 mortars, and the Israelis admitted to two command personnel dying. You can tell they're higher up in the Israeli military because they're 25 and 30. They're not conscripts in their first or second year of military service. There's an aerial massacre in Deir el-Balah, but what is this? What are they doing? So what do you how do you explain this? What I think is happening here, what I think the Israelis are doing is I think they're under maybe the wrong impression about how Hamas works, how Qassam or the Palestinian resistance works. I think that they believe that the Palestinian resistance is moving people around in the tunnels. I suspect. So they think they probably figure they're probably calculating along this line. I don't know. I don't know either side. So take this as pure speculation. But I think they're calculating that when they come in a big way to Gaza City, to Beit Hanun or to Jabalia or Zaytun, and they go in there with a division or a couple of brigades or whatever, they probably figure that Qassam or Hamas can move troops to those areas to reinforce them. And so they might be figuring that if they can attack along the Netzarim corridor and Shujaiya and Khan Yunis and Rafah all at the same time, then they can pressure the Palestinian resistance so much that they won't be able to reinforce all these fronts, and then they'll get a breakthrough somewhere, as opposed to trying to mass it all into one mass and punch them in one spot and then go punch them in the next spot. The thing is, I think the reason I think this is more or less playing into the Palestinian resistance's hands is because I think that the way that the resistance works is based on zone, and I think they stay pretty close to their zone. And so the consequence is that when Israel is putting everything into their Jabalia offensive, the resistance fronts in, say, along the Netzarim corridor in Rafah, they're just waiting. They're just waiting. They're just mostly waiting. So if you attack everywhere, then all the resistance fronts can get engaged at once and start actually contributing to the attrition of the Israeli forces and destroying their armored vehicles and causing casualties and slowly undermining Israel's military, which is the way they've been fighting. So I think that whatever that Israel is doing now, it looks to me like they're trying to exert pressure across the line, such as it is. It's not exactly that there's a line, but up, down, and in the middle. Um, I think that the consequence of that for them is just that they're giving the Palestinian resistance more opportunities to attrit their forces. So that's what we're seeing. And that's what we're seeing in the videos and in the field reports is field report after field report in all, especially Shujaiya and especially Rafah. You probably also heard or seen of the fighters in Shujaiya who have set up their ambush and they're waiting for the Israelis to show up. And in the meantime, they're just kind of they're on video on swings at a playground, just sort of talking, so explaining how they're waiting for the Israelis to come. So the kind of relaxed courage or the relaxed nature of the fighters in the sense that they know what they're going to do, they know what their mission is, they're very confident in terms of how they're going to carry it out, and all their all they have to do is wait for the Israelis to go predictably into the ambush that's waiting for them, which I think is exactly what happened in the case of this video. There's another story in that kind of is telling about where Israel is now. So the director of Al Shifa Hospital, Dr. Abu Salamiya, there's a whole mystery of who let this doctor out. So they kidnapped him, they tortured him, and then somebody let him out. But the Minister of National Security says it wasn't him. The director of the Secret Service says it wasn't him. The prison service says it wasn't them. Nobody wants to admit it. So there's this mystery of what's going on, who's in charge. Somebody's lying. Somebody is lying. The question is why. And that leaves several interesting questions about what is happening with Israel's command and control, with Israel's military goals, and with what Israel is doing as they are getting attrited up and down Gaza. So you may have seen Ben-Gvir, the security minister, saying, since assuming this is a killer quote in terms of this is what the West is supporting. This is exactly what the West is supporting and promising to investigate or whatever. Ben-Gvir said, since assuming my position, one of my highest priorities has been to worsen imprisonment conditions for Palestinian prisoners. I do not care about the international community's anger regarding prison conditions. So this is the security minister of a country that is entirely dependent on the international community's goodwill and free stuff to do this. And here he is basically just spitting in the face of that community and making a mockery of it. And the West is obviously here for it. They're happy to be made a mockery of because this fits what they are actually about, which is genocide and supremacy. There's another thing. But the mystery of the prisoner, of the released prisoner. There's been a number of prisoners released besides Dr. Abu Salmiya. There have been prisoners that have been released that, they look like they report how badly tortured they've been. They report the horrific conditions. And I wondered why. But I saw in a report, well, apparently, purportedly from the Israeli media. I don't really go to the Israeli media very often. It's not a part of my ritual. I'll sometimes go to look things up, but it's not where I get my news from. I'm not scanning the Israeli media on a daily basis, but they, one of the resistance channels that I saw said that the Israeli media says that while we've been seeing numbers like 9,500 Palestinians that have been detained or imprisoned or captured or held hostage by Israel and tortured since October 7th, the Secret Service, the Shin Bet, says that Israel has more than 21,000 prisoners, and the prison capacity is 14,500. So at first I thought there must be some important reason why the Israelis are releasing these prisoners. And the simplest explanation is that they just don't have the capacity and they want to imprison more and they want to torture more and they want to keep the torture and prison machine going. And I thought that's a little maybe too simplistic. There must be some hidden motivations, but maybe not. Maybe it is that simple. The point here, though, is this is also, you've probably also seen the human shields. Al Jazeera published a report about how Israel is using actual human shields, not the way Israel talks about human shields. Israel, when they kill civilians, they just say, "Oh, we killed all these civilians because Hamas uses human shields," and that is a lie, and it's um, a justification. And also, they're lying fairly openly because they also, as we talked about in our Tanky Therapy session on Sunday, they also publish great pleasure in how much they torture and how much they enjoy killing these civilians, how much joy they get from the torture and murder of these civilians. But they'll tell you whatever they think you want to hear, and if you want to hear that it's because of human shields, they'll say Hamas uses human shields. Hamas embeds. You'll hear genocidal journalists like Piers Morgan say that they have to kill them because Hamas embeds themselves into civilian populations. But that's not true. Israel is conducting a war on the Palestinian civilian population, and that war on the Palestinian civilian population is conducted with the full throttled support of the Israeli civilian population and all of their pro-Israel supporters here and everywhere else. That's not human shields. But I'll tell you what is human shields. Human shields is when you send at gunpoint a civilian into a tunnel entrance or into a residence that you're planning to move your troops into. Human shields is when you tie a young person onto the front of your vehicle as you go into a military zone where you're intending to conduct combat operations. That's human shields. And that's what Israel has done and has been doing on camera, again, proudly, very openly. And the United States has said, "Oh, yeah, we've heard about that, but we're asking them to investigate it." That's how that works. That's how that works. But in the absence of any consequences for the coming from the West, which I know is a ridiculous thing to even contemplate, there are, I believe, as I've been saying on this channel, serious consequences for degrading oneself in this way. And I think there are cracks along this line. And specifically, there is a crack between the military and the political decision-making leadership in Israel. And I think there's a little bit of this game that's playing out in the pages of all the news that's fit to print, the New York Times, the newspaper of record, especially this story. Israeli generals low on munitions want a truce in Gaza. Israel's military leadership wants a ceasefire with Hamas in case a bigger war breaks out in Lebanon, security officials say. It has also concluded that a truce would be the swiftest way to free hostages. So when you go through this article, they have a series of Israeli military leaders basically saying they've come to the realization they're only going to get the hostages back through a ceasefire. They want a ceasefire and they're hoping that Hamas will just somehow disappear. Netanyahu, they say, is holding it back. generals are having doubts. The military fears a forever war in which its energies and ammunition are gradually eroded, even as the hostages remain captive and Hamas leaders are still at large. The military said they're in accordance with the political echelon to achieve the goals of the war. Um, those who think we could make Hamas disappear are wrong, Hagari said on June 19th. Hamas is an idea, it's rooted in people's hearts. But then this article and the generals are all have their own delusions. So they want to replace Hamas with something. That's what they think is the answer. They think that they've eliminated 14,000 Hamas fighters, the bulk of Hamas's forces. They believe that they can destroy Hamas as a fighting force, if not to destroy Hamas altogether. These are all delusions. But here's some sobering, if this is true. I don't know. It's the New York Times. I don't take for granted that any of this is true, but they are saying that Israel is short of spare parts, munitions, motivation, and even troops. Some reservists are on their third tour of duty since October, struggling to balance the fighting with their other commitments. Officers are increasingly distrustful of their commanders. And more than 300 soldiers, I think this is very low, 4,000 have been wounded. An unknown number of others are suffering from post-traumatic stress. At least some tanks in Gaza are not loaded with the full capacity of the shells they usually carry. 5 officials and officers confirmed the army was running low on shells, spare parts for tanks, military bulldozers, and armored vehicles. So the other big delusion at the core of this article, which is by our man Ronan Bergman, who told us a lot, as you know, about October 7th. He wrote that long article in Ynet, or is it Ynet? Yediot, one of the Israeli papers about October 7th. And this is the same guy. He's writing this New York Times article with Patrick Kingsley. And the thing is, the other delusion at the heart of all of these calculations is the idea that they want to have a ceasefire in Gaza so they can go and fight Hezbollah in Lebanon. The thing is, Hezbollah has said very clearly that if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, they'll stop their support front. In fact, there's an amazing statement by Naim Qassem, the Deputy Secretary General of Hezbollah, today. He said, if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, we will stop our support front war with Israel with no discussion. So, I mean, that's kind of the end of the story. That's not in the New York Times article because that fact destroys their whole carefully constructed edifice of the need to get peace in Gaza so they can go fight Lebanon. Lebanon is only fighting them because of Gaza. Hezbollah is only fighting Israel because of Gaza. They've told them, we will be fighting you until you stop the genocide in Gaza. They said, if there's a ceasefire, we will stop with no discussion. But then they said something really interesting. They said, if what Israel does is something between a ceasefire and no ceasefire, we can't say in advance what we'll do. Because they know the way that the Israelis and the Americans do these things. They are not gonna, Israel, if they do a ceasefire in Gaza, they're gonna try to avoid doing it with an agreement. They're not gonna do an agreement and have humanitarian aid and give the hostages. I mean, an agreement is the only way to get the hostages back, but they might declare some kind of unilateral ceasefire at some point and let a bit more aid in and let some prisoners out because they're running out of room for to torture people, but they they may not do an agreement, but they might say, look, we've done a ceasefire, so you have to stop. And Hezbollah might say, oh, I don't know. They're saying they don't know what they're going to do in the case of a somewhere between a ceasefire and a no ceasefire. I guess they'll decide based on how close to a ceasefire it is and how far from a no ceasefire it is. The other amazing thing that Naim Qassem said is that the Israelis, if Israel wants a limited war, there's a lot of talk about a limited operation. If they want a limited operation, they can go for a limited operation, but they can't expect us to follow suit. They can't expect us to respond in a limited way. They can't expect that we're going to keep our response contained within their parameters. They're not in control here. So it's it's an interesting thing in the sense it's an interesting revelation from the New York Times. I think these numbers are low. I think Israel has still considerable resources to continue whatever it is that it thinks it's doing right now. I think they can continue this for a long time. But the point is, it's not about running out of men or even shells. They can adapt, they can have a few less shells. The way they expend ammunition is so wasteful anyway that if they were to stop wasting ammunition the way they do, they could probably go on much longer than they have been. They could lower the rates considerably and still maintain their murderousness at a very murderous rate. But the point for me is when you have the top leadership like Ben Gvir saying, I don't care what anybody thinks. My job is to make life worse for Palestinians. When you have people using human shields and making atrocity video pornography and being rewarded for it at all levels, I think you're going to get, and I think you may already have gotten with very little fanfare, situations where soldiers are told to do something that is dangerous by their commanding officers. And they say, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm going to risk my life for this thing. I think it's cool to get atrocity videos. I think it's cool to go and commit atrocities and make these trophies for my dating profile. But I don't want to go get killed. And I don't want to go in that building, or I don't want to drive that tank down that road, or I don't want to try to go into that tunnel that might be booby trapped. And I think there'll be more of that. And that's how an army disintegrates. And an army that is told that they can do whatever they want to whoever they want is not an army that can act with discipline. It's not an army that can seriously train. It's not an army that can make sacrifices to achieve objectives. So I think that type of disintegration is already underway with the Israeli army. And I think that's only going to be accelerated as things go on in Lebanon, as they start striking deeper into Lebanon. I said I think Lebanon is happening. Others don't. Let me just conclude maybe with a note on how I see it developing. I think what Israel's gonna do is continue to strike deeper into Lebanon. They're going to continue to hit civilian targets. They're going to continue to try to hit they're going to use more and more of their missiles and drones, and those will be answered by strikes from the other side, and Hezbollah will start hitting them as well. So it'll be standoff confrontation like it's been, but at some point Israel will opt for some kind of incursion, and it'll be probably rebuffed or worse. And that's when the kind of quagmire situation starts, because they'll be taking casualties and then they'll feel like they have to get revenge, and they'll continue to do bigger airstrikes that'll be answered by bigger airstrikes that then they have to answer. Otherwise, they won't be able to restore deterrence. And those pressures politically will be in conflict with the army's desire to try to find a way out of that conflict, which they will be sinking deeper into. I said I would conclude, but I can't conclude. I can't conclude because I have to circle back to the West Bank. There has been unfathomably uh, massive developments in the West Bank. I mean, okay, that was probably a bit exaggerated, but there was a huge invasion of Tulkarm that came and went in between the last sitrep and now. There was an invasion of Nablus, which was just underway. There was a sniper operation, probably a Palestinian resistance sniper. They're not saying too much about it, but near Nablus, a settlement, Har Bracha, from a long distance, and a sniper hit a settler there. There was a Palestinian Authority arrest and attack on resistance fighters. I think it was in Tulkarm as well. Just now, today, there was 4 fighters in Tulkarm that were assassinated by an Israeli drone. There was a funeral for them. And there's been Palestinian authorities, there's been an active resistance effort to not have a civil war again. They were issuing communications to the Palestinian Authority to tell them, please stop killing your own people with your weapons. If you have weapons, you should use them against the occupier. Stop killing us. And I mean, the role of the Palestinian Authority is becoming so absurd, because the Israelis have announced that they're just going to apply Israeli law. They've gotten rid of the accords. They've flushed the accords that maintain the position of the Palestinian Authority. They've flushed them down the toilet. So there's not even really a legal basis for the Palestinian Authority anymore. But the Palestinian Authority is still behaving like some kind of roving assassination squad, killing resistance fighters on behalf of the Israelis who don't even respect their role as subcontractors. So that's there's a situation. The situation from the Israeli perspective in the West Bank is also interesting, because that's another crack, in the sense that you have the finance minister, who's the best friend of the security minister. So remember, the security minister is Ben-Gvir, and he was yesterday, or 3 days ago, he was criticizing Ben-Gvir. So the finance minister was criticizing Ben-Gvir. Smotrich, you might have heard of Smotrich. He said the Israeli police have completely failed. And check this out. I mean, whatever the stuff these people say. I mean, you can't. You need some kind of Rosetta Stone to understand what he's saying, but he says the Arabs of the West Bank can turn Kfar Saba into Kfar Aza, Ra'anana into Be'eri, Netanya into Nahal Oz, and Tel Aviv into Sderot within hours. So when you hear the resistance say that the West Bank is the most strategic, the West Bank is the cradle of the resistance, it's clear that at least the most fanatical Israelis see it the same way. So, or maybe this is part of his game to try to extend police powers or militia powers or whatever the game they're trying to play in the West Bank to is probably well suited to alarmism, where alarmism probably plays well into that strategy. Nonetheless, it's a pretty remarkable quote. So, um, that's what we can watch. What we can watch in the coming days. Watch for more attrition on all the fronts, more exhaustion from the Israeli military, possibly more leaks, more cracks, and more rolling towards the war in Lebanon and the Israeli attack on Lebanon. That's also going to be extremely destructive for everybody. And last, you can watch for on Friday whatever it is that Ansar Allah in Yemen is going to announce. I will definitely come back for that at least. So until then, hang in there because there's no end in sight on this one. And I will see you in the next one.